Good afternoon, everybody. It is Monday, December 18th, 2023, and I call this meeting of the Montgomery County Board of Elections to order. I will note that we not only have a quorum present, we have the entire membership present as well as our hardworking staff. My only remarks for today is to point out that we have a more limited agenda than we usually do, and in many years we have not met in December. But we did have some things that we needed, or at least one thing in particular that we needed to do today, and which is why we're meeting. We are required under the bylaws to have certain things listed on the agenda, but it's more intimidating than it looks, and we'll try to proceed through it efficiently. And then the only other thing I would say is I just want to wish a happy holidays to the board and staff and to all of our attendees today and anyone else who hears this. So with that, let's move on. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, next is disclosure of campaign contributions or attendance at fundraisers. Does anyone have anything to report? Kevin, a question for you. Are we operating under the new bylaws or the old ones? Because I may have attended an event that I would have to disclose under the old ones.
I think we're operating under the new bylaws. They have not been formally approved, but the reality is that I think I've gone through the substance with the Attorney General's office, and obviously if we were under the old bylaws, there would be certain bylaws that wouldn't be applicable to many of our members since they're new board members.
Good, very good point. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, it was a party event, so I'll skip it because we all agreed that party events didn't need to take up our time at our board meetings. The next on the agenda is public comment. I'm aware of at least one person who asked to speak in advance. So, Janet, if you could please make Mr. Fletcher a panelist. Michael Fletcher has asked to address the board. Mr. Fletcher, it looks like you have the same issue that Boris was having earlier.
I can't start my video, so but that's not necessary. So I'll just begin. If that's okay with you, Mr. President. I know my audio.
David, you're frozen.
Yeah, David's frozen on my screen. Ruh-roh.
Yeah, David is frozen. Yeah, all right. Are you back, David?
He's back. He just needs to unmute.
Are you all able to hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear now, Mr. President. Go ahead.
But the entire last segment was frozen.
And I think he's frozen
I think
again.
he's frozen again.
David, are you back?
I think I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, but nothing that you said after Mr. Fletcher came through to any of us.
Okay. Well, the good news is that most of what I said was that he had the same issue that Boris seemed to have before, and it seems like he fixed it. And the second thing I'll say is that if I should disappear again, Daniel, please feel free to proceed. because I don't want to slow down our meeting because I seem to be having technical difficulties for reasons I can't explain. And Mr. Fletcher, why don't you proceed? And thank you very much for being here today, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you and to the board and to the staff.
You are obviously wearing your Christmas sweater.
Yes, I am.
Enjoy.
All right, my comments are, at the October board meeting, I presented information about the large number of blank ballots that were cast in Montgomery County in 2020 and 2022. Since then, the State Board of Elections has tried to change the definition of blank ballots in order to justify these very large numbers. However, the new definition that a blank ballot is actually a blank page of a ballot is in conflict with the definition of a ballot provided in Maryland election law, section 9-203. Also, the new definition is inconsistent with the term ballot described in the voting operations judge training booklet for the 2022 primary, and the definition provided in the ES&S manuals. The State Board of Elections' own website is in conflict with the new definition. Footnote 1 to the description of the 2022 post-election automated ballot tabulation audit states, quote, "There is a known difference in how the voting system and clear ballot tabulate individual ballots. The voting system reads each ballot scanned, regardless of the number of pages, as one ballot. Clear ballot, however, tabulates each page of a ballot as one card in both cards cast reports. Therefore, the total number of cards cast in a multi-page ballot, as calculated by clear ballot, will be greater than the total number of ballots cast as reported by the voting system." Mr. Brajkovic provided information from the manual audit of the 2022 election, which compiled blank votes in addition to ballots cast for various races in several precincts. However, when the number of blank votes from the audit is compared to the number of blank ballots reported by the tabulators from the tabulator report of ballots cast by precinct and party, the numbers reported by the tabulators are many times larger than the numbers from the hand audit. I'm concerned about blank ballots because if a voter inserts a ballot into a tabulator, but the tabulator counts the ballot as blank, that voter has had his voting rights infringed. I hope that you would agree that the large number of blank ballots in Montgomery County's elections should be investigated to assure that the machines are counting them accurately. The issue could easily be resolved by hand counting the blank ballots from a few tabulators and comparing the results to the blank ballot count registered by the machines. A fair audit would not involve using the output of the machines to independently verify the accuracy of the machines. A truly independent audit would compare the machine results to the real world. In this case, the real world would be the paper ballots cast by the voter, not ballot images. Ballot images are machine generated and are not real world. What would prevent the Montgomery County Board of Elections from authorizing a real world audit of blank ballots in a precinct or two? That's the extent of my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Alex, I will come to you. Can I'd like to give Boris an opportunity to say something first, if he'd like.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Fletcher, for your comments. If I could just very briefly reflect on your comments and possibly on the numbers that are presented on the second page of your comments as a total for the counties in the state of Maryland. Let me start by saying any question that you point out in your comments and they related to, in your words, discrepancy in terminology used by the State Board of Elections, I would need to kindly ask you to direct your questions to the State Board because we are not custodians of their website or any messaging that state provides on their website per se. The second thing that I would like to say is that Montgomery County Board of Elections conducted and passed multiple pre-certification and post-certification audits. So all the audits that we were required by the law, by the State Board of Elections, we conducted on time, we completed, and our results were certified as correct. The third thing is, I believe, I looked at the numbers that you kindly provided to all of us, and they're available to public on our website, about number of black ballots between the counties and between elections in 2020 and 2022. And I have to go back and make another comment on something that we discussed earlier. And that's the fact that in many instances, our voters, when they return a mail-in ballot, they not return all the pages of those ballots. Montgomery County opted to supplement missing pages with the blank cards. We did it so, for example, if the ballot had 3 cards, we will have whole set completed by bipartisan canvassers in the course of canvass. We did it for our own reconciliation purposes, so it will be easier on our end to track the numbers so they match between the scanned number of cards versus canvassed. Again, it's Montgomery County, it's a volume. If you
Boris,
look,
before you go on, let me just clarify. What you're saying is that if the voter voted the first page of the ballot, didn't vote pages 2 and 3, we inserted blank pages 2 and 3. We left page 1 in as the voter did it, or duplicated if duplication was required.
not if they didn't vote, if they didn't return it to us.
Okay.
Yeah, if the ballot had 3 cards and voter just voted, for example, for president and returned that card with the first contest on it, and did decide not to vote for anyone and therefore not to return the other 2 cards, we would add blank cards. And when I say we, I mean bipartisan team of canvassers in the course of canvass.
And this was an option that the state gave us.
That's the option that the state gave us. That's the option that Montgomery County took advantage of. So we did it in order to reconcile for us to make it easier to reconcile the numbers, because it's easier to track full sets of ballots than partial sets. And the last thing that I would like to add, there is a comparison here between the counties, and you can see a jump in the number of blank ballots from one county to another, from one election to another. I would just, if I may suggest, to take a look at the ballots that were presented to voters in those counties. There are counties, and I believe from the top of my head, Howard County, that had 1 card ballot in 2020, which means the moment you voted for someone on that card, that ballot cannot be blank. I believe Montgomery County had 2 and had 3 in 2022. So number of cards matter. And this analysis here, where you see, for example, big jumps from 2020 to 2022, I believe to great extent correlates as well to the number of cards that those ballots had. And again, I admit I didn't go county by county to check all of them, but I'm just saying, combination of option to add blank ballots in case a page or card is missing, in addition to number of cards for ballot in a county, makes a huge difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boris. Alex.
So this is perhaps directed to Boris and Mr. Fletcher, but let me ask you first, Boris, is your understanding of what these numbers mean different from what Mr. Fletcher contends they mean? Because either it means that 41,680 ballots in 2020 had no vote on any card, or it means that maybe they had some votes on 1 or 2 cards, but not on all 3. I'm not sure what these numbers actually mean and what you and Mr. Fletcher think they mean and whether you agree.
I think that Mr. Fletcher and I had many conversations about this and where our disagreement lays on this exactly one. The way it was set, the way we understand it, the way it was explained by the state, is that a card if there are no races or contests voted on a single card, that card is counted as blank ballot.
And so that would be counted among the say the 41,680 for 2020 in that
That's
instance.
correct. So we didn't have 41,680 ballots, sets of ballots, ballot sets that were blank. That means that we had 41,680 blank cards spread among, I believe, 350,000 ballots times how many cards we had in 2022 or 3, I cannot recall from the top of my head. So the way we see it, it's a number of blank cards, basically card front and back with multiple contests on it that voters decided not to vote for a single race on a card.
Is a card one side of the paper or both sides?
Both sides.
Both sides. Okay. So if there's one race that's, or if there's one side of the card that has no votes for anything on it, it's counted as a blank card and it gets counted in this tabulation that we see here that Mr. Fletcher provided.
If there are no selection made on both sides of the card, in that case, that card is counted as blank. However, because we are big county, our ballot has more cards, it's a blank card. In smaller county, which has all the contests condensed on one card, it's a blank ballot. So it's a terminology issue. Montgomery County is big. We always have more contests, more races, more questions. That's why I said, looking at these numbers, you have to add a column and compare how many cards each ballot had for each of these counties. Because if it was only one card, the moment you just vote for president, that cannot be a blank ballot at all. If it has 3 cards, you choose not to vote on any of those constitutional amendments or changes to county charter at the end, that's your blank card.
Mr. Fletcher.
I will take a look at that, Mr. Brejkovic. However, I still think there is sufficient evidence from the definitions of what a blank ballot is to argue, and I am arguing, that the entire ballot was counted by the machine as blank. And it wasn't counting cards because our voting system, as described in the State Board of Elections website, our machines count all the cards that a voter inserts into the machine as one ballot.
Mr. Fletcher, can I ask about that? We spent a lot of time with these ballots in 2022. We had a countywide recount for county executive in the primary. I guess, and maybe this is also partially for Boris, but I think that we would have noticed if there were 40,000 blank ballots that were part of that. We certainly saw a lot of ballots, and I don't remember, Mr. Fletcher, if you were able to attend our canvass, but I could certainly imagine that you might have. I guess what I'm trying to understand, I understand the problem with the state's terminology, and definitely if I were in charge, I wouldn't be calling a blank card a blank ballot, because there's definitely a difference between the voter who doesn't vote at all and still submits their ballot, which I'm not sure how large that group is, and the voter who decides not to vote for certain races, where we have lots of voters who do that. But I guess I'm trying to understand, when you say you have your evidence, but when you cited to your evidence was what the state calls these things. And I guess I want to know if there's some other reason to believe that there are 40,000 ballots out there that were not counted in any way.
Well, in addition to that footnote on the state's Board of Elections website, the definition in the election law, section 9-203, indicates that a ballot is all the votes cast by the voter, which would indicate if there are multiple cards, they would be included in.
Back to my point that I wouldn't call a blank card a blank ballot, but I guess my question is, Boris is basically saying that these are in fact, regardless of how they've been labeled by others, that these are in fact blank cards. That is also consistent with, for I think, and others can say if they disagree, but consistent with what we've seen in the ballots that we've seen. We have not seen a huge number of blank ballots. Now, I don't know whether we would, but we've had, we, like I said, we spent a lot of time with a lot of ballots, in 2022. But I'll take as a given that the state law says something different, and that perhaps there's other publications that say something different. But do we have any factual information that suggests that these ballots were not counted? Because we also have records of the number of people who checked in, returned ballots, etc., and I believe that those match up.
Well, one of the reasons I was asking if there could be any way we could have an audit of that, maybe a precinct or two, that would clear up the situation, because you'd actually look at the paper ballots that were put into the machine and see what that machine registered and compare those two numbers.
Well, I'll just say that that is a very labor-intensive process to find, an issue that we're not quite sure exists, because I think that what Boris had described is consistent with our experience. And I'm not quite sure why a hand count would be considered more reliable than a machine count. And I definitely don't agree that it's only a fair audit if it's if it doesn't use images, because we have no indication that the machines are not operating properly. We do have an indication that we are mislabeling through no fault of our own, blank cards as blank ballots. That's the way I look at it anyway. But I'm certainly willing to consider anything that would, that would address any real concerns that exist. But again, I think every voter that votes, we keep count of those that check in. In early voting and election day, we keep count of the ballots that are returned, by mail. And I don't believe we have a discrepancy that would account for 40,000 blank ballots. The entire ballot, not the cards.
Understand.
Yeah. Any other comments before we excuse Mr. Fletcher? Alex.
Mr. President, maybe it's a question of verifying that, or being able to tell Mr. Fletcher with some confidence that there's code that tells the tabulator, it's in a computer instruction that says if, one card of the entire ballot is blank, then count that as blank. Because it's really a question of where are these numbers coming from, and what is the programming telling that machine to count, right?
Boris, do you have a response to that, or do you want some time to think about it?
I will need to look more into this, but if my memory serves me well, the memo that was produced by the state and that was sent out to the board members and I shared with Mr. Fletcher actually reflects on tabulation of these blank cards or blank ballots in the process on the scanner itself. So I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it talks there about incremental increases as per recorded blank card.
Yeah, their definition that they promulgated last month matched what you described, Mr. Brekovic, earlier in the meeting. So.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Daniel.
Yes, Mr. President, and again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everyone. I was just going to make reference of the email that I received that Boris made reference to. I think the definition challenges we are facing is the fact that Montgomery County's ballots usually, maybe in the past 2 cycles, have not been just one card. All of them have not been on one card. Unlike when the state is dealing with multiple counties, and as I think Boris just said, that in some counties, all their ballots is most likely on just one card. And so one card, then it becomes just a ballot as opposed to multiple cards. However, if a voter decided not to vote on one of those multiple cards, then you have a blank card within a ballot. Boris, help me if that's the confusion or the misinterpretation we are facing, or Mr. Fletcher is bringing up to us.
From the very beginning, I think we understood each other that there was a misunderstanding of terminology, or that we were not understanding terminology in the same manner. So I would assume, for example, that in Calvert County, from the top of my head, I might be wrong, all the contests were on one card, which makes the whole ballot. Machine records one ballot. Machines, in the same instance, if there is a blank card in Montgomery County, doesn't record 1/3 of the ballot. It records a blank card. Unfortunately, terminology is here to report that card as a ballot.
Boris, if there is a 3-card ballot and I only vote the first card and there are 2 blank cards, is that listed as 2 blank ballots?
That's my understanding.
So
Yeah,
that's
well,
yeah,
yeah,
I think
that
that's
would,
the issue.
that,
Sorry.
and we have-
that's certainly one of them, because
Yeah.
Daniel, you haven't had the joy yet of experiencing our canvas, but the insertion of blanks for those who don't send them back is definitely a part of that. But anyway, okay.
If I may just add for Mr. Fletcher, Mr.
Yeah.
President knows this very well because it's part of our conversations when we try to project the turnout and the return of vote by mail and everything. Montgomery County has a high number of voters. We maybe internally refer to them as federal voters who tend to vote general elections only and tend to vote just the beginning of the ballot itself, top contests. So this doesn't come as a surprise to us at all. Because when we go through the canvas, we will see a whole set of voters who would just vote for the president or the governor, maybe Senate and Congress, and they leave it at that.
Okay, Alex, and then I'm going to have one very brief question for Mr. Fletcher, and we need to move on. Go ahead, Alex.
I understand. I don't want to delay this any further. I think, if Mr. Fletcher's assumption is correct, then let's assume that the race that had the highest number of votes cast for it was governor.
Okay.
Then if Mr. Fletcher is correct, you would have had 20,098 more ballots cast than total votes cast for governor. But if that's not what happened, then we know that this is counting cards and not entire ballots.
I'm not
Wouldn't
sure
that be?
I'm not sure I follow your math, Alex.
Well, I think Mr. Fletcher is assuming that 20,098 means there were 20,098 3-card ballots with no votes cast for any race on them.
Right?
So,
Or at least the machine counted it that way. Yes.
well, right. And if it counted it that way, then you would expect that, if you had, for example, 600,000 total votes for governor, assuming that was the most frequently voted race, and then you would have 620,098 total ballots cast. Wouldn't that make sense? That if your theory was correct, then that would mean that all of those 20,098 were recorded as having been cast, but with no vote for any office or any question. But if the numbers don't suggest that, then I would think that we're probably right. It's counting cards and not entire ballots. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, I'm not sure I follow it completely, but I think I know what you're saying. What you're basically saying is similar to what I said, which is that we don't really we haven't really accounted. We've already accounted for the number of ballots that we did count, and we really don't have any indication that there were 20,000 more people who voted.
Yeah,
Nor
1,000 more people.
nor do we have a drop off of 20,000 people who
Right.
came to the polls and skipped governor.
And skipped everything, or skipped
right.
everything. Yeah.
It skipped everything, which would be a pretty unusual thing for 20. And I think that's part of what Mr. Fletcher's point is that he can't imagine 20,000 people coming to the polls and voting for nothing either.
Right.
So
There were a lot of provisional ballots that were voted blank too. It's like, who would go through the rigmarole of voting provisional and then not cast any votes?
right, but some of them would definitely be voters who did not vote for other, for some of the lower offices or the ballot question.
Right.
My last question for you, Mr. Fletcher, is the numbers that are in your at the end of your comments. They labeled the year, but they didn't say whether they were general election or primary election. I assume they were general election, but I'm hoping you can tell me.
They were general election numbers, yes.
Okay, that's very, very helpful to know.
And as I recall, these come from EL 45A reports, which are generated by the machines. So, and I think you can find those on the website, on the county website.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate your being here as always, and once again, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the director's report. Boris.
Thank you. I'll go very briefly through director's report. Director's report was shared with the board, and it is posted on our website under today's board meeting. As I mentioned to the board earlier, the minutes of the November meeting will be prepared and shared with the board for the January 2024 meeting. All the documents for today's meeting were put on our website on December 14th, as well as shared with the board. In regards to the last meeting and the action items from it, there was a question about website statistics and the referrals, those 2%. The question was to which number that 2% actually referred to, and it refers to number of active users. While I had our colleagues from TEBS online, I also wanted to check, and they confirmed that that number is consistent across county agencies that they have their own websites. Just wanted to make sure that we are not up and down across the county. In regards to the untimely ballots, I spoke to the postmaster from Rockville. We are still waiting for more information from his office. Monthly statistical report was shared with the board on December 2nd. It's also posted on our website, indicating that we have 679,891 active voters and 66,202 inactive voters, with a total of 746,093. When it comes to the State Board of Elections, State Board did pick up the items that were approved by the Montgomery County Board of Elections. So on November 30th, the State Board approved all 14 early voting sites as proposed by the Montgomery County Board. On December 13th, we received information that the Maryland State Election Administrator approved 58 drop boxes for 2024 presidential cycle as approved by the Montgomery County Board. And on December 14 meeting, the State Board approved 234 polling places and plan as approved by the board. When it comes to the personnel, I have to inform the board that Mr. Christian Robertson joined voter registration as an office service coordinator. Mr. Robertson was with us in 2020 and 2022 in the course of canvass, and I think his last employment was with the PG Board of Elections. We have selected a number of candidates for the remaining vacant positions. Number of vacant positions: 2 IT tech were selected, and we expect them January 2nd to start. Water Services Manager is expected to start mid January. We should be interviewing for Office Service Coordinator for candidate filing position in the course of hopefully this week, while the next one will be Water Education Training Specialist. Again, we hope for this week, but we are too close to the holidays, so I would not be surprised if the interviews take place in early January. When it comes to the temporary positions, as I mentioned the last board meeting, we really try to stay ahead of curve on this issue. All the managers and the whole team was involved in interviewing and selecting candidates to join us to help us conduct 2024 primary elections, and we are finalizing onboarding process, which includes mandatory medical and background checks. When it comes to section activities in water services, it's another day in the office, updating water registration, processing water registration requests, and doing all the list maintenance activities based on the data that's provided to us. When it comes to IT section was involved in the first statewide testing of the new poll book solution that took place last week, and our IT manager continues to work with the TEPS, Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions, to finalize the election work and future vote portal. I believe that portal should become available early January for all the users. Operation sections, we are in a replenishing supply phase of the preparation, so that's taking some time on that end. And when it comes to recruitment, I just wanted to, in this report, to emphasize something that's interesting, but something that's very typical for Montgomery County. This number, which indicates that our voters prefer anything that's done online. They prefer QR codes instead of paper. And the number of applications that we received, over 2,100 through QR codes, and just a handful of paper applications, just confirms the trend that we have in the county. That will be very short director's report for this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Boris. Any questions for Boris about the director's report? Alex? Alex, you're muted.
I had a question about the budget, but I guess he mentioned it in the director's report, but if this is not the appropriate time, I can wait.
I'm not sure. Do we have another time for budget in our agenda?
No, I can answer.
Okay, go ahead.
What I'd like to do is to find out how much this ballot sorting machine that we are paying $181,000 every fiscal year to lease, how much it would cost to buy that. Just so I can, because that sounds like a pretty hefty lease payment every year, when it might be much more cost efficient for us, given how many mail-in ballots we process and how much we would use it. It might make better sense for us to invest in buying the machine and, not letting SBEs, as it were, make money off us by these, high lease amounts. But I don't know how much the machine costs, whether it's $1 million, whether it's $500,000, but $181,000 every fiscal year sounds to me like a pretty hefty lease payment.
So I actually looked at those numbers, Alex, as well, and I tried to look at the lease. The cost that we pay annually, my understanding, is not just for the lease of the machine. It includes the maintenance and licenses that come along, which is big chunk of this. I do not recall from the top of my head, but I can prepare it and share it with the board. I know that the lease agreement, once it expires, we have option to purchase the equipment for $1.
How long
really?
is the lease?
I don't want to misspeak. I believe
Okay.
it's 26 or 27, but let me confirm one more time. But
Okay.
I know that I checked and I was informed that once lease expires, the machine is ours for $1. It's
That would-
lease
yeah.
to own. I think that's how the term is called.
Yes.
All right, yeah, lease to own, yeah, definitely. I would like to know the details on that, yeah, when you get a chance.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
just have to, I have to dig a bit deeper into costs of licenses and maintenance, because if you would recall, together with this sorter machine, in 2020, we struggled with those small letter openers to open all the envelopes for canvas. And you
Yes.
will recall that for the last canvas, we had two big machines that could, I think, open like 8 to 10,000 envelopes per hour. So yeah, those two machines are part of the package as well.
Okay.
Oh, okay, more than just one machine then.
Yeah, because we bought those two big letter openers as well. Because if you remember in 2020, I believe that we had 4 or 5 6-feet tables lined up with the letter openers on top of them at the end of the room. And we were just had 5 people doing nothing but opening letters throughout the whole day. And it was done, but it's kind of waste of space, waste of human resources, waste of time. If we have a big machine that we can cut everything by 1 or 2 persons.
So the letter opening machines are also leased, Boris, as part of the same lease within that same amount of money?
I believe it's a whole same package. But as I said, I
Okay.
started looking into this in the numbers because Alex mentioned earlier, so I wanted to get everything ready. But obviously, I didn't complete my research, but I will complete it. But as far
Okay.
as I know, this is lease to own, and that's the goal at the end of the lease to purchase it for $1.
Yeah, I think we would all be interested in the comparison of buying it versus leasing it, because if it's lease to own and we're going to pay the same amount we would have paid, that's one thing. If it's lease to own and we're going to pay a lot more than we would have paid, that's obviously something very different.
If I may add on that, I have to look
Yeah.
at the historicals. I think the timing when the purchase or lease agreements were signed was a bit unfortunate in terms of unforeseen budget expending for that fiscal year.
Mhm.
If my memory serves me well, I believe the lease agreement was signed sometime in April, which is almost towards the end of the fiscal year. And therefore, putting together the whole funding package to pay it in one go was not necessarily a viable option. But again, it was not planned ahead of time because we didn't know that the option existed. And lease came very late in the fiscal year, which basically meant finding resources throughout the county. And it was also county involved in the decision which option needs to be taken because additional money had to be supplemented to our budget.
Thank you, Boris. Ami.
Yes, I had one question. You did not address anything under the meetings, events, item H, and I was wondering if there were any.
So I went through my notebook. I apologize if I forgot, but there were no meetings that I would report to the board. There was some meetings that were postponed, and I believe will take place in January. But that's I would say typical as we get closer to the holiday season.
Thank you.
Okay. The only thing I was going to add to the discussion about the equipment is that I hope that no one would interpret our wanting to make sure that we are economical with, no one would confuse that with our not being thrilled to have the equipment. The ballot sorting machine in particular, but also the letter opening machine are just major game changers. And so this is about making sure that we get the best bang for our buck, not that we not use those opportunities. And I can see Alex is nodding his head in agreement. So I'm glad to hear that. I was pretty sure that we were all in the same place on that one, having
But yeah, I
lived
have
through
some
the past.
experience with companies that have played games with equipment leases, and I'm familiar with that. So, I like to make sure that we're not being taken to the cleaners.
I
Fair
figured as much, and I will look forward to hearing some of those stories offline someday, so that we don't create any legal problems for you or me. But
May I just add, if
yes.
I may, Mr. President, I believe when we signed the lease, there were like 3 counties that took over on this equipment, And I believe that as of today, there are 7 counties in Maryland that opted to use the same equipment going forward.
So the word has spread.
Word has spread.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Boris. Kevin. Attorney.
So the MOUs for early voting with Montgomery County, Gaithersburg, and Sandy Spring, those agreements have all been sent out to their representatives to review and to comment on, and I hope that they will be returned in early January. Boris, Mindy, and I still need to go ahead and work through with Montgomery College with regard to the Dropbox video surveillance and a short MOU with them, as well as with MCPS. And I've spoken to Stephanie Williams, their general counsel, on an unrelated matter, and we sort of agreed that we would schedule something for mid-January to get sort of all of the key people on a call to go ahead and work through the technology and what needs to be done to save the video footage for the various drop boxes that will be at the school system. So that's with the MOUs. Earlier this week, we did receive an email from the state board staff regarding the bylaws for the Board of Elections. They were somewhat concerning because I think what the person did was compare the model bylaws with the Montgomery County Board of Elections bylaws. And over the years, the Montgomery County board have taken a lot of time to look at the bylaws and make what they believe are appropriate tweaks for Montgomery County, which are not necessarily reflective of what the model bylaws are by SBE. So I did speak to the Assistant Attorney General about an hour before our call today. We did go through the comments that were made by the state board staff. There may be 1 or 2 very minor tweaks that they may ask in terms of, 48 hours to post materials as opposed to 10 o'clock on the Thursday beforehand. And that's only because they're having problems in some other jurisdictions with information getting posted in a timely fashion. But the long and short of it is there really not going to be any substantive changes to what you all had recommended and voted on for the bylaws, and I suspect those will get approved during the January meeting.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay.
I'll just say about the one provision that you did mention about the posting of materials, that our standard is actually earlier than the state's standard in deference to our population in Montgomery County that does like to read things before meetings, and also our desire to hear from people in the weekend before our Monday meetings rather than not. So I'm hoping that they're not going to tell us that we have to have a lesser standard than what we have adopted in the past, but I'll certainly anxiously await hearing what they say.
Well, actually, the board over the years has imposed a number of restrictions that are far greater than required by the state board. For example, board members can't sign petitions. Under the model bylaws, you can sign a petition. The requirement or obligation to present certain materials under the Montgomery County Board of Elections bylaws, it's required earlier than the model bylaws. So we'll work through some of those things. That doesn't mean that the board can't have an internal policy that says that materials still need to be posted on X date. I think what's happening is that they are having some problems in other jurisdictions, one in particular that they're in litigation about now. And the compliance with the bylaws has become a problem. I have indicated that while far from perfect, our election while we have been far from perfect over the years, the election director and the staff are very mindful of deadlines and they meet them. So I don't see that as a problem in Montgomery County, but they are having a problem in other jurisdictions in that regard. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Kevin? All right, next on our agenda is old business. The only thing I'm gonna mention under old business is that you all, I think you all know this, but I'm gonna put it on the record that at our last meeting, we put together a list of legislative suggestions, which I did transmit to the chairs and vice chairs of the Montgomery County House and Senate delegations, the members of all the relevant committees from Montgomery County. We did leave out the very last item that Alex brought up at our last meeting. After consultation between Alex and myself, we essentially concluded that we needed more information in order to be accurate and more data in order to be able to make any case that we want to make to the legislature as to why we should have our own ability to decide how many election day polling places and where they should be. So we agreed that we were going to put that off until next year so that we get some data from the 2024 elections in order to accomplish that. So the list that went did not include that. It did include the rest. I don't know whether it's up on the website yet. I sent it to all of you, but I know that I shared it with Boris very recently. I know that he intends to put it on the website along with the one that was distributed for our meeting last month. So that's a long way of saying that we don't have old business for today that we thought we might have. And so I just wanted to make that clear. Does anyone else have any old business? Okay, then next on the agenda is new business with the item listed being the polling place changes for the 2024 election cycle.
Sorry, David, if I'm looking at the right agenda, we have to touch upon website and outreach before.
You are completely correct. I am on the wrong. I skipped two of my favorite subjects, and I'm kind of surprised that I managed to do that. So yes, we have the website report and the outreach report. I'm pretty sure that I'm the one who insisted that both of those be on the agenda, although I think that Ami may have suggested the outreach one, but I certainly jumped to agree.
Well,
So,
Mr. We were not going to interfere with the ability to perhaps set a record for the shortest meeting this term. So,
yes, I understand. We're still going to set a record for the shortest meeting this term, but go ahead, Boris. Let's talk about the website.
Okay, let me contribute to the shortness of the meeting. I'll be very short. This is the second month that we are pulling the same statistics. And if you would compare to the previous month, you will see certain fluctuations of certain categories. I think that the whole point of doing this monthly for the calendar month is actually exactly this. Give us some time and we will try to be able to project these fluctuations on the chart, look for the explanations and where we need to look a bit more. One correction at the most visited pages at the very bottom, board meeting documents, it should be 335. I skipped one digit there. And as I announced last board meeting that sample ballot, number of visits to sample ballot will be high. This is still leftovers from Gaithersburg and Rockville municipal elections because this is for November meeting.
Any questions for Boris about the website?
And I did ask, and I'm trying to see if our agency is on level with the other agencies when it comes to organic searches versus direct bookmark and everything. We are plus minus 2% to the county averages. So
that's really interesting too, because we use QR codes that would probably boost our direct numbers. But
that's the information that I got for November. As I said, we would need a couple of months for this data to give us more input so we can actually project something on the chart.
Sure. Any questions about the website report? Okay, outreach.
So Gilberto Zelaya is absent today for the and I will just touch very briefly. And I believe as he announced at the last board meeting, as we get closer to the holiday season, we minimize our engagement with the schools, especially for the winter break, and we will pick it up in the new year. We shared the outreach calendar with the board. It's on our website. I was reminded multiple times by Gilberto to make sure to say happy holidays to all counterparts who helped us organize over 220 outreach events in this year. And we believe that that number will go up in 2024. The high number of outreach events that we had in a non-election calendar year was actually reported by the state election administrator at the last state board meeting. There's another item that was mentioned at the state board meeting that I have to present today as well. We did reach out to the state and ask for cooperation to work with MVA offices to project election-related messages on those TV monitors in all the MVA stations. So that's the work in progress. We want to have localized messages, not SB, but Montgomery County messaging, depending on our needs, whether it is encouraging voter registration or election judges or anything else. So state had meeting with the MVA, and I believe that project will materialize in early 2024.
Thank you for that. And I want to second what Gilberto said about the holiday wishes for all the folks who have been working with us, which we very much appreciate. Any questions on the outreach report? Okay, so now we go to the polling place changes for the 2024 election cycle. It is written on the agenda in the plural, but I think it's actually one polling place that we are talking about, unless I'm missing something, but Boris will explain.
It's just one. Give me a second to try to share the presentation.
Boris, you are muted.
Okay, now I hope that everyone can see. Miss Mindy Williams, our operations manager, she's here with me. We will, please, Mindy. We will just very briefly talk about polling place for the precinct 0434 and the reasons why we are presenting this change to the board. So, as the board know, and for the general public, whenever we use any private facility for a polling place, we have a lease agreement with the owners, and we had the lease agreement with the polling place premises facility in 0434 for the previous years, which did not got extended for the 2024. That was the wish of the owner, and we respected. So our recommendation is to look at the to relocate of a polling place for 0434 to Candlewood Elementary School, which is a public facility located in the precinct, and it's actually located where the high concentration of voters in that precinct reside. And public transport is available with some distance as indicated on this slide. Currently, the St. Candlewood Elementary School is a polling place for the precinct 0419. So we, looking at that school, there were two options that became obvious. Option number one is to consolidate 0419 and 0434 into one room. In this case, it will be a school gymnasium, or option number two, which will be to combine 0419 and 0434 in the same building, but using two different rooms for each individual polling precinct. So one polling place would be an all-purpose room and one would be in gymnasium. After reviewing all the numbers and the last elections turnout, the vote by mail, the current number of people who requested to be on the permanent mail-in list for these two precincts, staff came with the recommendation for the board to adopt decision to consolidate all 434 and all 419 in the gymnasium in the Candlewood Elementary School. This slide is follows the data that we provided for all the previous changes and indicates that the total current location, future location, and total number of voters who would be voting at that polling place as assigned on a precinct level. This slide shows the number of 2022 gubernatorial general elections and the total number of voters who voted early, who voted on election day, who voted by mail. What you will see in a green line is the total number of voters on the permanent mail-in list per these precincts as of last few days. So if you look combined number of voters on election day in both precincts combined was a bit over 900 voters. These are the pictures of Candlewood Elementary School, which is not a small school itself. This is location of the new proposed location versus old polling place. The difference is 1.2 miles. And if you see these small streets, this is where high concentration of voters currently is around new location. This is all-purpose room that was used in previous election as a polling place for 419. And these are the basic specific data that we prepare for every polling place as we go forward. You will see that as we move next, this is the gym. Gym is big. It's almost 3,700 square feet, and it's more than enough to accommodate voting for two precincts in one polling place. This is the images of public transportation and what's available. Again, this is not new location per se because it was used previously for 419. We are just adding a new polling place. So any public transport that worked before, we are just adding a new place. That will be very short presentation for the
Okay. So I see, Diane, you have your hand up. Do you have a question or a motion or what's?
I do. Well, a question that may lead to a motion. It's
Okay.
point of clarification right now, because I'm not. Do I understand correctly that we have a recommendation from the staff to consolidate these into one room? I was unclear.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
And before we go there, Diane, let me just clarify. They would still be two separate precincts. There would still be separate ballot styles for each precinct.
Yep.
But they would be voting in the same room instead of in two different rooms in the same facility.
Got
Would
it.
this permanent consolidation?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Would this be a permanent consolidation or just for 2024?
So this is staff's proposal for 2024. Whether something if for 2026 staff will come to the board to present a polling place plan and board will approve it. Whether the board will accept it as a solution for 2026 or go something else, that will be up to the board.
Okay. So I do not support consolidating precincts when there's a viable option to separate them into two separate locations. for a number of reasons, but without going into those, what, maybe here first, why staff recommends one location rather than two, one room.
Thank you, Diane. And I'm going to turn to Boris in just a second. I just want to clarify, no one is proposing to combine precincts.
Yeah, I'm
We're
sorry.
we're only talking about where the polling place locations will be for 2024. Okay,
Correct.
Boris.
But voters from two precincts would be using the same entrance,
Correct.
sharing the same space,
Right.
using the same,
Different ballot styles, but
Yep.
they would be in the same location. That is correct.
and I can't think of an occasion where I have ever supported combining precincts into one physical location. So what is the rationale? Boris,
Okay.
Go ahead, Boris.
thank you,
Okay.
please, and thanks.
Yeah, let me, the rationale is based on process and numbers. So if we use two different rooms, we will have to have voters to go and find their own room. It's given that some voter will spend quite some time queuing in one room only to learn from election judges that he or she should have been all there at that time waiting to vote in the other room itself. Because voters do not necessarily recall or pull out their voter notification cards to figure out which number of the precinct they are when they come to the polling place. The
Okay.
second thing is the numbers. If you look at the election day turnout at these polling places, we are talking about 400 people voting in a whole day in one place and around 500 in another. And that's reflection 2022 with general expectation the number of mail-in ballot requests will go up. So we are talking about very small number of voters turning out to vote in person on a given election day. Consolidating would give us higher number of voters to vote in a big room, which is, if my memory serves me well, the gymnasium is bigger than 4 early voting sites that board already approved. Basically gives us sufficient space to organize everything. And it will also release certain expenditures because we would not necessarily cut in half number of election judges, but we will have a less need for a number of election judges that will be assigned to the consolidated polling place versus combined, where we have two different rooms that are being used.
Thank you, Boris. Diane,
Yeah,
then
I just
Daniel,
wanted-
then Ami.
On the first point, people wasting time spinning their wheels in the wrong room. I would just say to that whenever I've gone to vote, there seems to be an abundance of the young help us vote, the group that we get from high schools and all the way down to, I believe, 6th grade, that can certainly take a look at directing people to the correct rooms, or once
Diane,
they're in the
could-
room, there
could
could be
I-
somebody stationed. And secondly, Boris, just your point, trying to minimize confusion. What I'm concerned that there's a greater chance housing all the materials for separate ballot styles, as David was pointing out the differences in one location. I mean, just human error, I think, dictates that commingling this unintentionally could lead to more mistakes that then take more resources and time to remediate. So again, I'm exploring answers to my concerns right now. So,
May I just very briefly touch upon the last point that board member raised about commingling the ballot styles. In consolidated polling place as the one that we proposed, we will have 2 ballot styles for 2 precincts. At early voting sites, we have 257 ballot styles. And I believe that human error is possible. Wrong ballot can be given to anyone in any place, anyhow. But I believe that if we have 2 ballot styles that get shipped out in 2 different cards, that every voter, when they are issued voter authority card at the check-in by check-in judges, it will say ballot style at the top. They will go to the checking table. They'll be given the ballot style. Election judges are trained to ask the voter to confirm that number at the voter authority card at the ballot batch. That's how system works. So I understand the concern, but I believe compared to the early voting and potential there, this is really minimal.
Okay.
Boris, would you please stop sharing your screen so we can all see each other? That would be helpful.
Sorry.
Thank you. Diane, thank you. Daniel, then Ami.
Thank you, Mr. President. Boris, I think you started explaining the voter's journey, and that's actually what my question was. Can you just, and Mindy, you can chime in as well. What will be the voter's experience when they walk in to the building that day?
So consolidated place, like any other polling place, the process is the same. Hopefully there will be no line, but if there is, you will wait in line. You will go to the poll books to checking table for checking judges to locate you in the poll book. Once you do that, you'll be issued voter authority card. It's a slip of paper which will state your name, your address, and the ballot style that you are voting and the party in the primaries. You will go to the ballot issue table with that same VAC, where judges who are manning that table will provide you with your ballot style and sign off on your VAC when you confirm that you got the ballot style that matched the number on your VAC. Once then you will go to the voting booth, you will make your selection, you'll vote every contest or some of them, whichever way you like, and on the way out, you will deposit that ballot in a scanner. Scanners are programmed to receive ballots assigned to that polling place. In this case, there will be 2 precincts, 2 ballot styles. So I would say it's normal process. It's not something that doesn't already exist in the county. I think we have 23 consolidated polling places already, and the system works on the early voting sites as a big concept where we are talking about 257 ballot styles. So the only difference is whether ballot issuing judges, when you approach them, whether they will pull your ballot from the left black card or the right black card.
So just to kind of clarify as well, when we consolidate sites, there are 2 separate ballot distribution tables. So there would be a ballot distribution table for 419 as well as another one for 434. So that's another way to kind of eliminate some of that chance for Diane's concern.
Okay.
So in other
That's
words,
very helpful.
Mr. President, can
No,
I
go
just,
ahead, Daniel. I'm sorry.
yeah, in other words, the voter's experience does not change. That's what I'm hearing. All right, back to you, Mr. President.
And then since Mindy, thanks, I'm just gonna jump in front of you, Ami, if that's okay, just to finish this one point. Thank you,
Sure.
Mindy. Do they use the same poll books?
It's the same poll books for the whole county. So
Okay,
every polling place has the same poll book.
got it.
Okay,
thanks.
Ami.
So my question was twofold. First off, do you have a schematic of how you would lay out the gym to minimize potential confusion? And the other is, what would be the economic costs in terms of additional people or whatever else you would need if you were to separate it into 2 rooms?
Okay, when it comes to the finances, I would need to go back and do the math. on the positions that would exist at 2 polling places versus 1. As I said, consolidating 2 precincts or 2 polling places into 1 doesn't mean that you eliminate 50% of the election judges.
Obviously, sure.
Yeah.
But
So
it should be a reduction.
there will be reduction. It's given. Reduction is given for additionally for the reasons that are numbers of anticipated turnout on election day. So if we have number of check-in judges and poll books that will be allocated to the polling place will fluctuate by the numbers of people that are anticipated to vote in person. If you expect 400 people to show up in a day, we can talk whether 2 or 3 check-in judges are sufficient for the spread of the day, or we need 5 or 6 if we are talking about 900, right? If we have 2 scanners in 2 polling places, in case one breaks down or something, do we need really 4 if we consolidate? I think we are okay with just 3. And that means 1 election judge less there. So, and then we are talking about transport and organization and everything. I can do the math, but as again, the cut is not 50%, but there are savings in a total.
And as far as the schematic goes, I gather you probably haven't had time to do that yet. But
What we looked, I'll be very honest with the board. We
Right.
looked the size, we looked the entry points, and we looked for the electrical outlets.
right.
These are the key ingredients for us to organize the flow. And we
Okay.
got all those 3 items that we need to have a proper flow at the gym.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call on myself because Diana, you've already spoken. I'll come back to you in a moment, and I'm going to start by making a motion to support the staff's recommendation for precinct 434.
And I second it.
And given that it's been moved and seconded, Alex, I see your hand, but I want to speak to my motion. First of all, I want to say that as Boris and Mindy mentioned, we've done consolidated polling places as long as I can remember in my tenure on the board. We have sometimes had them in more than one room. We have sometimes had them in one room. Quite frankly, I would bet that if I look back at the record, I've probably supported it at different times in different ways. But I did have the experience a few elections ago when it was done in 2 different rooms at Tilden Middle School, which is not far from where I live. And remarkably, early in the day, I was called. I don't remember if it was Kevin who called me, but it could very easily have been. I was called because there was a lot of confusion at Tilden Middle School between those who vote in the gym and those who vote in the cafeteria. Now, both of those rooms were quite large. Tilden Middle School, this is the old Tilden Middle School, not the new Tilden Middle School. It was built as a high school, so it was plenty of room in the cafeteria, plenty of room in the gymnasium. But every voter who walked in the door had to figure out which side of Old Georgetown Road they lived on, and that was what determined which place they voted. And there was, I personally would not entrust that to a future vote student, or at least not to many of them, because I don't think it's it's necessarily an appropriate task for them, nor do I think that the voters would necessarily respond in that fashion. But there were a lot of voters who ended up in the wrong place. A lot of voters who ended up having to wait in line in both places because they waited in line in one, then they had to wait in line in the other. So since that time, we've gone to ballot styles that are based on precincts. And in a primary, we actually would have more than 1 per precinct. We would have 3 per precinct because we'd have an unaffiliated ballot, a Democratic ballot, and a Republican ballot. But to me, this sounds like a much easier version of early voting. It's basically you come to the polls, you only have the maximum of 6 ballot styles to choose from. Mindy has already indicated that it's that there are going to be separate locations, so that it's really only 3 to choose from. Either way. And I do think that the vote, the combination of the voters' experience and the savings to us in both the number of judges that we need and the expense involved in paying them makes this not the hardest decision, because under those circumstances, we all know that it's hard to get election judges. It was hard to get election judges before election judges became well known across the country and the world for the downsides of being an election judge. Uh, we now have a way to locate the voters closer to the center of population in the precinct, in a public building within the precinct, which by law we are supposed to favor, saving money, saving labor, um, and saving the voters the frustration of potentially ending up in the wrong room. So to me, this strikes me as the right decision. I congratulate the staff on having found a solution to this issue, because remember, the reason why we're here today is because we are really past or very close to the deadline for the state for giving them our polling places. And this became a known problem roughly, I think, the same time we met in November, and the staff needed time to come up with a solution. They came up with one, almost instantly. So that's why I support this. I think it's the best solution to this issue. In 2026, we could have a totally different solution, because precinct 419, Candlewood Elementary is not inside of precinct 419. So it could very well be that we find something that is within inside 419 in the future. And we will cross that bridge when we come to it. It's way too late to make changes for now. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from. I will call on Diane and then Alex.
Yeah, I'd be happy to defer to Alex first.
I called on
It
you,
might obviate
please.
my need.
So, okay, fine. Alex, go first.
My only question, I don't really have an urge to vote against the motion, but is there any risk that it would cause our polling place plan to be in violation or out of compliance with House Bill 410 as codified at 2303.1 of the election law article? This is something, Mr. President, you and I have talked about. Maybe we've got enough margin that it's not going to matter, but it was something that I wondered about.
Well, I don't know the answer to that particular question, but I do know this. There is, and I don't remember whether it's in that piece of legislation or whether it's in a separate piece of legislation, but the state law requires that the first priority goes to a public building within the precinct boundaries. And I'm pretty sure this is the only public building within the precinct boundaries. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be okay with state law. I defer to Kevin and Boris as to whether they have anything to add to that.
Just very briefly, that our polling plan that was approved by the board and submitted to the state mirrored the number of polling places used in 2018. We have, when we learned about this issue and started preparing a solution for the board, we did notify the state that there will be adjustments to our polling place that might reduce the number of the polling places by one. If that would be board's decision, there will be no problem because we have a proper explanation that will be provided. At the same time, there are other counties who did reduce the number of polling places significantly compared to 2028, but Montgomery County is not one of them. 2018, sorry.
Yeah, Mr. President, I think it's really something we've been forced into because I think it is an elimination of a separate building only because we can't lease it anymore. And again, I think the consolidation makes some sense, but hopefully we won't run into problems with our polling place plan. But if we were, more than one above the 2018 number, then maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know. But if there is an explanation and our election director thinks that's not going to be a problem, then I'm satisfied.
Yeah, Alex, I don't see it as a problem. I mean, there are other jurisdictions that have they have substantially cut the number of polling places.
Okay.
Right, we are very close to our number, and as Boris said, I think we are exceeding it. Diane.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mindy and Morris, for the responsiveness. I think the question that I've remaining, I think is of such remedial nature that rather than embarrass myself, I'm going to talk to Boris offline, so thanks. I'll lower it and entertain your motion.
Okay, are there anyone else who wishes to speak? Because if not, we will move to a vote. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to support the staff's plan for precinct 434, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Back to the agenda. A list of future actions from today's meeting.
So I have written the only one thing, and I apologize if I missed something, but my understanding is that I should produce more explanation about sorter machine lease agreements, expiration dates on the lease, and option to purchase it once lease expires. Is that, Alex, correct?
Yes, yes, correct.
Okay.
And I think the alternative of purchasing sooner and why we're not pursuing that alternative.
All right.
Not just
One table.
about the alternative to purchase it at the end of the lease, realizing that the state is a party to this, so it's not necessarily all within our hands. Were there any other follow-up items from today? I will tell you about a follow-up item that we haven't discussed today, which is that we are actively working on getting board members the draft schedule for the canvas that starts on, by law, starts on April the 22nd for the primary. But we are, Boris has been working with staff, has been consulting with me and with Kevin, and we expect to get it for your comments and your availability soon. I hesitate to say exactly when, but soon. Ami.
Oh, muted.
No, the 22nd is, of course, Passover.
It starts in the evening, and this is during the day, and we will be adjourned in time for Passover
Okay,
observance.
just make a note of that to make sure we get out.
Yes. Yes. No, that is that has been part of the conversation.
Okay.
For sure. Okay, any other action items from today's meeting for Boris? If not, as board members know, we are moving the approval of the minutes to January. Our next meeting is scheduled for 3 o'clock on Monday, January 22nd. I will just remind board members that in January and February, the third Monday of the month is a federal holiday. In January, it's Martin Luther King Day. In February, it's President's Day. So we are scheduled to meet not on the third Monday, but on the 4th. And that is the plan. Okay, well, seeing that we have no other business, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Happy holidays.
Happy
Happy
holidays.
holidays to all of you.
Care.
Thank you.